And then financial crisis happened, and that was like the biggest challenge of my entire career. I mean, I had an offer from P&G that they pulled out of. I had 25% drop in sales overnight in the Q4. My investors didn't want to give us the rest of the money that they had earmarked for us, which we were taking as we needed it. They were like, no, 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 no. You've gone into default. We're not giving you any more money.
Welcome to Beyond the Fail, the podcast where we talk to leaders and entrepreneurs about their biggest business failures. We'll deep dive into how they overcame these setbacks, the lessons they learned from them, all to help you gain valuable insights. Failure is an essential part of the business journey, as well as being the key to success. So we're here to show you how to thrive from it. Eric, welcome to Beyond the Fail. How are you today?
I'm great. Thank you for having me, man.
Pleasure. Really looking forward to this conversation with your wealth of experience in business. But would you say you've always been an entrepreneur?
Yes, pretty much. I had no choice.
Why is that?
Well, I came to this country when I was 17 years old on a Greyhound bus from Montreal with $100 in my pocket and no green card. After struggling a couple of years, I was told that I couldn't really get a job without a social security number, but I could actually have a company that I take profits from. So I became an entrepreneur. It sounded like a good idea for me, especially that, I have a problem with authority. So, if I'm not at the top, I don't do well.
But would you say that your hand was forced there, or do you think that you had, entrepreneurial kind of motivations inside you that was just a catalyst for them coming out?
No, I think I had my life circumstances led me to become, and I think when you talk to a lot of successful entrepreneurs, not all of them, but I think you'll find that many of them became successful because of adversity in their youth. If my parents had a healthy marriage and good finances and sent me to a great college, I'd probably be working for JP Morgan. I'd be miserable. But life didn't have that in store for me. And because I believe I'm lucky to have a mindset of growth and expansion, I didn't let my future be defined by my predicament. So the fact that I had no education, no green card, I wasn't really employable. I hated working for people from my first job. I just hated it. I found my bosses to be uninspiring. And, I wanted to be extremely successful. I had a chip on my shoulder and I wanted to prove the world that I was worthy. And I think the way I thought of that is by becoming autonomous, free, financially secured, and all the things that come with it. But at the end of the day, it was a fire in my belly to prove the world that I was worthy and I wasn't the loser they thought I was in my youth. Or at least that's what I thought they thought. Probably nobody really gave it much thinking, but, I my circumstances led me to become an entrepreneur, and I found that it really works for me. I don't label myself almost anything except the word entrepreneur. That's one thing I associate myself, and I'm dedicating my life right now and my time to helping the next generation of entrepreneurs. That's what I'm passionate about. That's what I do.
Did you have any entrepreneurial ventures before you got on that Greyhound bus and your hand was forced?
I was 17 years old, so no. The short answer is absolutely not.
But you didn't have any of those stories of like selling, sweets or magazines to, school kids or anything like that?
Listen, I had a paper route, but that didn't last very long in Canadian winters. So no, I I moved to New York when I was 17, had a very low paying job as a warehouse clerk. I was an illegal alien. Um, I found my way down to the Caribbean, and there I started my first business, the surfwear apparel company. Did pretty well. You know, I was very, very happy with the outcome. Many of the young people on the island were wearing my surf clothes. So that was really cool. And then I became a government contractor out of sheer coincidence. My manufacturer at the time got a lot of government contracts in 1991, asked me to join him to build that company. I did that. That was super successful. That was my biggest success. I was only 23. And then I went off on my own at the age of 25 to start my company in Miami. And that was a huge failure. Talk about big lesson learned there. So 26 years old, just spent 18 months failing miserably at my new company. I lost everything I had accumulated up to that point, except a brand new BMW. And I met my wife, at the time, my girlfriend.
So it wasn't all failure.
It wasn't all bad, you know. It was one of the happiest times of my life, by the way. It's funny how things don't have to be, in parallel. I mean, I was having one of the best times of my life because emotionally, I was growing a lot at that time. Was going through therapy. I met my wife, um, and from an entrepreneurial standpoint, it was the worst time in my life. I was broke. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I thought I would never achieve what I was aspiring to achieve. But it taught me a lot. And again, I've always used my circumstances as opportunities. I think that's been one of my gifts, I think. Um, and the fact that I was broke again, and I met my wife, became an opportunity in the next venture, which was the art of shitting about 18 months later.
Just going back to that surfwear business, why did you pick that as your first business?
It picked me, man. I was, all I knew was clothing, apparel. Um, I had access to manufacturing on the island. And I basically told them, listen, give me some samples of fabrics. I'm going to go sell some stuff and I'll get some orders. And I went knocking on doors and basically I was telling people, um, what's your best seller? I can make it, you're buying it from a brand, you're buying it, you're making a 50% margin. I can make the same one for you with your brand on it, and I'll make it for less than you're paying, and you can sell it for less and make more margins. So I had a pretty good value proposition, starting getting orders right away. And I stumbled upon a surfwear, surf shop chain on the island, pitched them the same thing. It was the late 80s, so, things like Billabong and all these surfwear companies were super hot with fluorescent shorts. And I said to him, listen, I can make those. You're buying them for 16, selling them for 32. I can make it for 8. You can sell them for 24. I can put your brand on it. You can do private label. The guy gave me a 500 unit order. 2 weeks later, he was ordering thousands of units. He couldn't keep them on the shelf. So that was fun. That was fun. That was my first taste of success. And then I transitioned to the biggest opportunity at the time, which was, my manufacturer getting $25 million worth of contract from the US government when the first Gulf War broke out. So I walked away from my surfwear little business and joined the company, and we started to make some really cool things happen there. But I got sick of living in the Caribbean. I wanted to do my own thing. I didn't want to be attached to somebody else's business. And I came to Miami, where I wanted to sell music by mail order. At the time, the internet was not a word yet. It was about to be announced. It was 1993. And I basically started a concept of selling music by mail order, but it needed the internet to make it a real viable business. And I was a little early for that. So I lost everything. I made a lot of other mistakes in that business. Um, felt like a real loser. I would never, I'm never going to get there. So next thing you know, we moved to New York City with my then girlfriend. And together we started The Art of Shaving in 1996. And luck would have it that I had no resources except that one possession, my BMW, that I sold for $12,000 and started the business. And that's where I started to develop my philosophy of thinking big and starting small. I think one of the greatest lessons I've learned in my career is that when we try to go way too fast, we stumble and crash. Um, and, there was a blessing in having a bootstrapped company at the time in 1996. I was lucky that within 2 years of starting the Art of Shaving, we were making almost $1 million profit a year.
Wow.
That was that was a lottery ticket. Businesses struggle to make a profit. Here we are, profitable year one. And by the time we open our second store, we're just year after year after year, those two stores were just generating enough cash to support all of our financing needs to grow the company.
That's amazing. But where I'm intrigued because you mentioned about starting that surf wear business and approaching people and obviously seeing an opportunity for and pitching them with as you said, a value proposition around kind of margin, and then obviously at 23 going on to work with your manufacturing partner with such a large government contract. But it feels like you've got kind of natural business acumen. Where did that come from?
Yeah, I don't know. It was I had something built in that was really good. That's what my partners in the manufacturing business discovered when they saw me in action for the year before that, and they thought this guy's got something going on. And I was really lucky to always be surrounded by people that taught me a lot. They called me the sponge in those days. They said, "We're going to call you the sponge because, we say one thing and you learn 10 things and you're just sucking information as much as you can." And since I quit school, I've been a learner. I continue to learn every day. And that's been kind of one of my secret, right? Is constantly in a book, learning something, learning. But they did see that I had some good business instincts, um, which I honed over the years, but they were there. They were there for some reason. I was able to tap into them. I could sell, I could
Mm.
inspire trust. People saw this kid coming in wanting to manufacture stuff. They trusted me. I went to a friend that I had met a few months earlier and asked him for a $30,000 loan that I would repay with 20% interest in 90 days. He gave me the money without a contract. These were things that, look, arriving in America at 17 years old with $100 and selling your business to P&G 24 years later takes, I'm not, I don't want to sound arrogant, but not everybody will do that. It takes something more than just sheer resilience and grit, which I have a lot of. It's just a bit of something.
No, exactly, and I'm intrigued to to maybe see what that is, or did you have like early mentors that have you said you got taught a lot. Was that from books or was that from mentors or both?
I learned from people. I never, in those days, we weren't thinking mentors. We didn't have great books that I've read in the last 10 years. We almost reinvented the wheel all the time. So, um, I think I had some innate talents of being very resourceful. I'm a go-getter. I don't wait for things to happen. I make them happen. I have an idea. I implement it tomorrow morning and I go after it. Uh, I'm not the smartest, richest, most educated, but I'm the most fucking resilient guy. out there. So, you drop me on the floor, I get up, I'm stronger, I'm faster. That's been my thing. I mean, not anymore. Now I'm a big fat cat, but in my youth, I was very, very gritty in my youth.
And is that and again, is some of those attributes because of the circumstances that you talked about coming from and that you were in at the time, that you didn't really have a choice but to be agile and to, implement quickly and to essentially, work hard, be gritty and hustle essentially.
Look, you need to have some backbone, I think. You need to have that character. You need to be aggressive by nature to a certain extent. Those things you're born with. But then your circumstances really, like not having a plan B, man. You're in the middle of the ocean. You either swim or sink. Trust me, you're going to swim a lot more than you're capable of, on a regular day. It's just your survival instincts kick in, but you need to have a base there that's there. If you're just a passive,
Mm.
artistic, guy, maybe becoming an aggressive entrepreneurial leader, CEO is not your path, right? You have success somewhere else. You gotta lean into your natural talents to be successful in life. But your circumstances, and frankly luck, play a role in your success, in your story, in your journey.
And given, I would say the fairly quick transition that you made, in a short space of time, over those years to, you know, coming to America and then, obviously moving into that contracting business and then, starting art of shaving a few years later and obviously making, a significant amount of profit very early. Was that a difficult transition? Because, that is a different skill set, isn't it? Being entrepreneurial, being gritty, essentially being a one man or, working in a small company into running a large company. Not everyone can make that transition. Not everyone can be as sort of flexible as that. And that's why sometimes, you have a startup CEO, then they bring in another CEO later on because they can't deliver.
Yeah.
It's different, isn't it?
It's very difficult. It's one of the most difficult things to scale a business is the transition from that mom and pop to small business to medium-sized business. And again, if you try to do that when you're not ready, you're gonna get hurt. They call it growing pains. They call it, you're just gonna that's a recipe for disaster. In our case, as I said, um, I think, and this is something I've developed over time, is the idea of prudence in business. Prudence is not being risk averse. Prudence is being wise. It's thinking things through. It's learning from your mistakes. It's avoiding mistakes as much as you can. And for us at the Art of Shaving, I was able to make that transition. Again, I had that leadership quality. I understood how, I'm very structured in my work. I think if you're going to scale, you need to be extremely structured. I have color coded socks in my, things like that. I'm that guy, very organized and very structured. And that was really helpful to create processes and to create a company that could scale because of its structure. I'm also lazy, and in a good way. I'm lazy, meaning that I'm not a workaholic. I don't believe I need to do everything in the company. I've always delegated. I've always let people perform with my guidance and I think of myself as a coach,
Mm,
more than a boss. They're the ones creating success. I'm here to help them be successful.
mm,
That's always been my philosophy. And I think something that really helped me from the beginning is that I was always obsessive about customers
mm,
and selling. I think it sounds pretty basic,
mm,
but everybody I meet wants to increase their sales. I mean, what keeps you up at night? Oh, I want to grow my sales. Yeah, do you have a sales team? Not really. Do you have a sales process? Not really. They're an operation. They don't have a sales department. I was like 90% sales in my company from day one. I was like obsessed with selling. And, I reverse engineered all these things. I didn't think about it when I was a young guy. I thought about it now when I wrote my book. Why did I thread the needle?
Mm.
Why am I part of the, fraction of percentages of guys out there that went from startup to big exit? And one of those things was we always cared about selling more than anything else. Everything else was super important to me, but it was supporting sales. I wasn't thinking, I needed to have my focus on other parts of the business. It was always about the customer, sales, and I made my salespeople the most important people in the company. Um, and the CEO was on the bottom of that pyramid, is the inverted pyramid. I did that instinctively. I know now that it's something that's taught in school, that maybe Nordstrom was famous for, but it was an inverted pyramid where management was here to support the front line that were in direct contact. We called them our ambassadors because our livelihood depended on their behavior, their action. I had people all over the country, had to open a store in San Diego with a staff of 3 and perform at high level when I was based in Miami. So, um, you know, once we had the product and the proposition in place and the business model, it was all about managing people, and people included vendors, employees, and customers. That's 95% of my time was spent on that. And I think those are some of the philosophies that helped me. And again, throw a bunch of luck at it. Whether I created that luck or spirits from above chose me, whatever you want to call it. A lot of luck, a lot of luck made it possible. That's not lost on me. That I was extremely lucky, and people contradict me when I say that. We say, "No, you created your own luck." I'm like, I agree with you. I did create that luck, but I was fucking lucky, man. So many times. And that's the difference between me would have been successful and me would have been successful, right? I think that's the difference that luck can have on entrepreneurs.
Yeah, I think every business story, business success story, has some luck in it, doesn't it? A chance meeting with someone, or in a random place that that you don't expect it, in a lift or something. There's always little stories like
There's
that.
always something.
When you say uh, obsessed with sales, obviously you've given some great examples of that. Was that talk us through like what that sales process looked like and how it kind of changed over time, and what the sort of early learnings were, and what the salespeople were doing. Was it all retail? Was there phone based or?
We had eventually we had all of the above. We had salespeople in our stores. We had salespeople in our offices. We were omni-channel. We were dealing with wholesale, third-party retailers.
Hmm.
We were dealing with our own retail stores. We were dealing with internet sales at the tail end of our company. So we did it all, but it was always the same philosophy. It was about, you know, really, first of all, you don't hire a bookkeeper to sell, right? You need people that are built for the selling world, right? People that are outgoing, people that I really enjoyed being with. I was a salesman myself. I've managed sales team. For me, it was always hiring people that I liked. I enjoyed speaking to you for 10 minutes. You've got a salesman, wiring. My customers are going to enjoy you as well. If I enjoy you, they will enjoy you. Then you give them the tools, you give them the training, you give them the accountability, you give them the clarity of what you're expecting from them. You don't become the reason they failed at their job. You become the reason they're successful. And if they're successful, you're winning, right? I always tell them I care about your success because, for selfish reasons. You know? So it's about all these things, it's really a process. It's a culture. I think we had a very strong culture that was about selling. It was a selling culture. We said, we build this company one customer at a time. We really, really lived by that value. We train our sales staff to explain, listen, if you're gonna say hi, how are you? You gotta be genuine about it. Don't just say the words, just mean it. They're coming into your house. They're not just coming into your store. It's showtime. I know your cat passed away, but the customer doesn't care about that. It's like a Broadway play. You're an actor. You got to put on a good show, a good face. Happy makes money. We had all these things that we talked about, like happy salespeople make money. You know, we trained them. We wanted them to be professionals. We explained that selling, when you're trying to sell something, it doesn't work. You got to let the customer speak. You got to try to add value to the customer. You got to teach them what we do, how we do it, why we do it. Hire passionate people that really want to work. I was a sucker when people in an interview told me, I really want to work for this company. It's like, okay, you had me. Okay, I don't care. I don't care. You have no skills. You have me at the passion of you really wanting to work for this brand. And then we had people coming in and saying, my friend works for you guys and he's raving about his job. So I want to work for a company where I can rave about my job. So these were things that I cared about because same as me as an investor right now. When I was running the art of shaving, I had worked for losers. I didn't want to be that. I didn't want to be that boss. I wanted to be inspiring. I wanted you to love working for us, and I wanted you to have a good time. And it was a positive experience to be part of this group and feel like you're part of something bigger than yourself. I think we did a good job at that. Now, as an investor, I'm not a banker. I wasn't trained as a banker. I was trained as an operator, entrepreneur. I know what you're going through. I empathize with your situation. I've been there and I can relate. And this is very powerful in guiding, people that I coach or invest in.
No, absolutely. And you said that you were, very customer centric. Give us a couple of examples of, how you embodied that.
I was obsessively customer focused. Again, some of my experiences before opening the art of shaving, like I remember going with my wife, we couldn't afford it, but we went into a Prada store and we had horrible service. They treated us horribly. And I said, how can a luxury establishment treat customers like that? It doesn't make sense to me. You should be worshiping your customers. I had a wonderful store manager in my second store. She was amazing. She just brought in the bacon week after week, day after day. She was incredible. And one day we had a customer complain about her. She had a fiery personality. And I respectfully came down on her pretty hard about that. And she told me, she said, listen, that's not fair. We never get complained. We're the best customer service company in the block. You get one guy and he's a crazy guy and you do this. And I said, I'm not trying to give you a hard time. I'm trying to teach you something very important. We can't even have one miss. When it comes to customers, one miss is way too many. It's 100%. So that's the culture I try to instill in people. When I was the store manager myself, I remember one day a guy came in with Rip in New York City, Upper East Side, came in with Rip. He looked like a homeless guy almost, except he didn't smell bad. And he had this broken razor he had bought for $200. And he says, I don't know, can you repair it? I said, listen, don't worry. We'll give you a new one right away. The guy was like in shock. He's like, oh my God, this is so kind of you. I appreciate it. What customer service, blah, blah, blah. He walked out. 15 minutes later, he came back in, spent a couple of $1,000, which was a lot for us at the time, for his son's wedding, his groomsman. And he says, amazing customer service. It made me come back and want to give you more money. Well, then, okay. That's not why I did it, but I get the message. And I would teach people, I remember walking into stores myself to return a product. And they always make you feel bad when you're returning a product. They might lose some of that commission, or it's always awkward. You already are in the defensive. So I had that experience as a customer. And I would teach my teams, like, your best opportunity to impress your customer is when they're making a return. Give them the best return experience they've ever had. Smiles, no problem, we'll take care of it, whatever it is. And if you're really good, he's going to spend more money than getting a refund. So, but that wasn't the reason we did it. I just wanted, I think when somebody comes in already on the defensive and we can disarm them, you win them. These are some of the techniques, what I call the magic, because it's not the stuff you see. Company culture, passionate employees, customer service, all these things are not things you see with the naked eye that make a huge difference in your success. It's about doing the basics well, man. Yeah, don't be an asshole. Like, these are the pre-requirements to work for my company. Like, there's certain things you need to bring with you. Like, you're a nice person.
It's a fundamental.
We're not going to train you on that.
So, thinking about failure, we were kind of talking offline about it. What's your, I suppose, outlook or philosophy around sort of business setbacks and failures?
In what sense do you mean?
Well, I just mean, how do you view, how do you view failures, and when you're having those moments that things haven't gone to plan?
I remember when I was realizing the art of shading really had potential, and I was the CEO of that potential. I used to joke about, like, if I don't mess this up, it's going to be great. No, my job is not to screw this thing up. At this point, that was my number one responsibility. And I truly believe this. The reason why people fail is not because they're not smart, they don't work hard enough, they don't have an interesting business in their hands. It's because they've made too many mistakes along the way. And those mistakes catch up to you and they can kill you. So for me, I know there's been a lot of talk about failing fast and, listen, glorifying mistakes, I don't subscribe to that. I think you're going to make mistakes. The idea is to minimize them. The idea is to learn quickly from them, not to repeat them, to stop them as soon as possible. But I don't believe that you should embrace making mistakes. You shouldn't be sloppy. That's where prudence, I think, is a really important part of what I teach. It's what I call crawl, walk, run, and fly. You try to skip any of those. I mean, God willing, you'll go through those phases very rapidly. When you're ready to go to the next phase, do it. But if you try to skip one of those phases, and I've done that early and later in my career, it's a recipe for disaster. So, I think on, like, video games, you're going to stumble, but, you can't, it's game over, man. If you screw up, it's game over in business. And that's why, what is it? 70% of businesses will not last past 10 years. I think 99% of businesses will not achieve 10 million in sales within 6 years of starting. I mean, those are bad odds, really bad odds. So I think the reason I succeeded was some talent, some hard work, but having good instincts to avoid some of the pitfalls. I've avoided a lot of the pitfalls that I see entrepreneurs falling into.
And that mail order company that you mentioned, which was that didn't work. Why do you think that didn't work? Was it? I mean, you said that you were too early. The mail order company, the music by mail order.
Oh, I knew nothing about the business. I was going way too fast, investing way too much, way too quickly. By the time I realized I had invested in the wrong areas, it was too late to try it again. I made a lot of mistakes. I mean, I was 25 years old on my third business. Um, I still knew nothing back then. I was a baby. I was a baby. Um,
And what were those mistakes?
I think I was focused more on building the machine than selling. I wasn't really thinking about how to get the customer. I was really focused more on setting up customer service. I'm putting, the catalog together. I'm getting inventory, all the things that were not going to make it a scalable business model. Um, and, I was inexperienced. I was trying to, I had experienced a couple of successes. So I think I thought I was golden, if you will, that I was a little bit arrogant, perhaps. I had a little bit of money, not that much. I had $250,000. So back in the early 90s, as a 25-year-old, it wasn't a bad amount. It was not bad. I don't know what the equivalent is today, but it's probably over 1 million. Self-made. And I thought, I have a great idea. I love music. I love this. I love, the retail stores are passe. People are going to want to order online. It wasn't online. It was, catalogs.
Mm.
It was so flawed in many ways. I think it was just great. I needed to get a back of the hand slap at that point in my career to really do it right the next time around. And I'll tell you, not having resources to start the art of shaving was a blessing for me in hindsight because I really bootstrapped. I went slowly in the beginning. I started as small as I could physically start. I remember when my wife and I were talking about starting that business, I said, let me think about the smallest way we can start because all we have is about $15,000 to invest. Maybe we could open a tiny little store somewhere in Manhattan. I can get products from my boss, from my job, that was the thinking at the time. We weren't, a lot of people ask me questions like, did you see a white space? Did you have a strategy? I'm like, bro, I was 20, 8 years old, broke, we just wanted to have a little business to occupy my wife, I was traumatized from my last failure. Well, this is not how it happened. But because I went slow, I was able to really learn the business and build a foundation to to grow it. And it took me 9 years to get to $10 million, and it took us another 9 years to get to 100 million. So when you look at the J curve they teach you in Harvard and on the business schools, the J curves never go from day one. It always goes like this, a hockey stick, you know? So if that's what you see in hindsight, try to do that as your business. And patience is the greatest killer of entrepreneurial businesses out there, in my opinion.
So you made, you said that you made some mistakes in that mail order business, and it was interesting that you said that the the circumstances again of that you encountered on Art of Failing sort of led you to essentially create that business in a certain way. So do you think that if that business hadn't failed, that you would have started Art of Shaving differently? Because essentially, you had all this money.
I may not have started it. My life, you know, you know, my life could have been very different, based on a hair from the situation, right? Uh, you take the next street over to get there, and you're not gonna encounter that situation. Your life could be completely different. That's not lost on me. I mean, the way I've been able to hit my destiny was by a lot of time being at the right place at the right time and turning problems into opportunities, turning failures into good things, always having that mindset of being open-minded, being positive. And my thinking has been a great gift that I think that was just the way I was born. I can't think. I've honed it, I've honed that positive mindset, but I don't know if I would even, have opened the art of shaving because I needed to fail at that business to really meet my wife. And I I needed to fail at that business to want to get the hell out of Miami at that time, move back to New York to look for opportunities, having a wife by my side that had a common goal of becoming an entrepreneur and becoming successful in her own right. And then having a job as in the men's grooming category by coincidence, and being asked to go to London for that job because, again, my boss saw that I had something about business acumen, right? He asked me to go negotiate some of his most sensitive deals. I was 27 years old. He's sending me to London instead of him going as a small business. That was weird, but he saw that like, I can fix that for you. He's like, really? I'm like, yeah, I can fix that for you. It's like, okay, go. So, as I went to London a few times, I started seeing the art of shaving stores everywhere. I'm like, the people I was dealing with had a store that looked like it. So that's another thing that I try to teach entrepreneurs. The idea, everybody says, what a brilliant idea to start a shaving. I'm like, no, I went to London. I saw 10 stores like that. I thought, listen, it might work and there's nothing like it in New York. We might do well there. And then execution is everything. You take 10 people with the same idea, they're not all going to be successful. It's execution that really wins the game. The idea is not that important. You need to work the idea, but then execution is really the be all of the whole thing. And that goes for failure as well, by the way.
That mail order company failing, is that the most significant business failure that you've had?
No, no. The most significant failure I've had is in the past 3 years. We started a brand called Ingredients. It's all relative because ingredients, to me, I lost more money with ingredients than I did with that other business, but it's a small part of my assets right now, so I don't feel it. Whereas back then it was 99% of my assets. So I guess that was the biggest failure I had. Yes. It was,
So,
yeah.
but I suppose which has taught you the most lessons?
I've been learning from everything I do. I wrote my book as I was winding down that company recently. And a lot of what I learned in that failure went into my book. A lot of what I've learned in my successes went into that book. I don't think failures teach you more than successes. I don't believe that, but they teach you invaluable lessons that successes won't teach you, right? What success teaches you is invaluable, but your failures are going to teach you things you'll never learn when you're successful.
So what did you learn from this ingredients failure?
I'd learned that ego can be can creep up in ways that we don't see right away. Even when you're not somebody with a huge ego, or you try to be humble, or you try to be, that, and keep your ego under control, because ego has a place in your life, but it has to be kept. But it can creep its weary head when you don't expect it. And I think the way it did that with ingredients is, given our huge success and our resources available, we went way too hard, way too fast. And I made the mistake I teach people not to make, which is, we start with 16 products, and, we rush through the whole phase of development. And then we try to go big, and we put big money behind it. And there was some arrogance behind that. In hindsight, if I had to do it all over again, I would have done it very differently. I would have gone much slower to learn all the mistakes. By the time I figure out the mistakes 3 years after launching that company, I had already invested over $1.5 million. And I was like, okay, now I figured out what I did wrong, but I don't have really the desire to go back and try it again. But it also taught me it also taught me that I'm at a stage in my career where two things are happening. One is I have the freedom to choose where I put my time, and I don't want strengths. I don't want heavy lifting. I used to be, in my 30s, I was kicking ass on the court. I was an athlete. I was competitive. I was winning championships. But in my 50s, you put me back on the court, I get my ass kicked. That's not where I belong. I belong in the owner's box. I belong in the coaching box. My role is very different. And that failure made me realize what I'm passionate about and where I'm going to be most useful and where I'm going to have the most fulfillment in the last chapter of my career, right? So
So is that what you meant by ego? Because essentially, you know, it sounds like you didn't listen to your own, you that concept earlier of crawling, walking, running, flying. It sounds like you didn't listen to that or follow that with this business. Is that what you meant by ego? You thought you could do it a different way?
yeah, I thought I thought, yeah, it was arrogance. I thought I could do it faster, better, bigger, you know, and, it doesn't matter how much you've been successful, especially as an entrepreneur, and especially in the consumer branding world, you really hit the reset button and you have to pay your dues every single time. It's like going up the mountain. Doesn't matter if you've done it. You gotta do it again. The conditions are always different. The challenges and the obstacles are gonna be different. You're gonna, you know. So that's what I mean by arrogance, is that for the art of shaving, I had no resources, so I was forced
Mm.
to really be careful and to take it slowly and to start really small, which is my philosophy. But with this one, we were thinking big and starting big and skipping stages. We tried to run before we can even crawl and walk. So yeah, that's what I mean by ego. And listening to your own advice, man. Is that my what is it, the cobbler's son, whatever the saying goes.
And was that painful to have, such a big success and then to have, that, that failure and, to be put back on your ass again, if to go back to the sporting analogy?
No, not for me. No, no, no. I revert to Nelson Mandela's saying, I never lose. I either win or learn. And this is how I take everything. You know, Writing my book was a little different than most other endeavors because that was putting myself out there, right? Brands and investments that succeed. I've had so many successes in my life. I feel good in general. Um, this failure was just it didn't put a dent financially. No, it was a great experience. I learned so much from it. I was very passionate about the project, and I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing today if I hadn't done that. That's just there's no doubt in my mind that I wouldn't have found my way if I hadn't gone through that, because I realized startups and being an operator is just not what I need to do right now in my career. That's not what I do best right now. I want to do it through the efforts and the smarts of young entrepreneurs that can use my experience, my expertise, my resources, my connections, combined with their energy, their ideas, and their relevance to today's business world. So I think that's how I see it.
I presume though the failure when you were 26, the music mail order company hurt because you said you lost everything, and obviously that was you know.
Yeah, because I had never been yeah, I had tasted success, and foolishly, when I was in my mid-20s and I was spending money like like a rock star, I thought I had made it. I thought that's it. Never gonna, I'm not poor anymore. I'm successful. Next thing you know, I'm broke again, and I failed, and I feel like worthless. So that was really hard on me emotionally. Um, I felt like the, it's like the mountain looked like it was 10 times higher all of a sudden, you know? Whereas now, failure was almost a relief. Like, oof, that's not my path. The universe is guiding me where I need to be. So it's a very different, we're I'm an older guy now. I can see things from a different lens, and I try to not let myself get too riled up by anything, up or down.
How did you pick yourself up at 26 though, having such a big setback and losing it all?
I licked my wounds for a year. Funny thing happened is, I I had I met my wife, as I said, and for 6 months I didn't work, and we lived off my credit cards. She's a small eater and she doesn't drink alcohol, so it went a long way. And then I ran out of money, and I thought, okay, I guess that means I need to go get a job. Yeah, So I I applied for a job in Miami, and coincidentally, I was hired by a company, and I didn't know it at the time, but I found out on my first day that I would be working for one of my entrepreneurial hero, which was another lucky break. And I was like, this guy was in my mind, he was like superhuman, and working with him and meeting him, I'm like, he's just a regular guy that just did extraordinary things.
Who was that?
There's no His name was Chris Blackwell. He was the founder of Islands Record,
Oh, right. Yes. Right. Yeah.
uh,
Yeah.
Bob Marley, one of my great favorite artists, U2, one of also my favorite artists. And then he sold that company and built a Miami-based hospitality company that I worked for. I only worked there for 3 months. They fired my ass after 9 months. I was not employable. I was not employable, you know? Yeah, so
Well, you said you didn't like. You said you didn't like authority earlier.
I didn't like authority. I thought, I was acting like an entrepreneur, but I was working to the man. So they fired me. And the day they fired me, I said to my wife, I said, there's nothing for us here in Miami. Do you want to move to New York City? And I think she said yes before I finished my sentence. So we packed up our BMW to our dog in the back seat and drove up to New York City in 1995. And, you know, yeah,
But it sounds like it didn't really knock your confidence at all in your own abilities.
not in my ability, but in my aspirations. So I knew I had talents somehow. I didn't realize it yet that my wife had incredible talents, by the way. She was only 20 years old, but she turned out to be formidable partner for me. And as I worked, you got my first job in New York City. I, I basically saved them from bankruptcy in the first 3 months.
Mm.
They were heading straight for insolvency, and they sent me to London to work things out, and they were able to continue operating for a while, long enough for me to start the art of shaving and to use some of their products for that.
And what was the biggest sort of setback or failure point at Art of Shaving? Because there must have been some on your way to success.
There was, we've had obstacles. I have to tell you, it was kind of a magical ride. It was a magical ride. I'm not gonna say it was easy, but it's almost like the sea kept parting in front of us as we move forward. It was a weird, I feel very, very lucky. And maybe it's because of things we did, but um, I was 28, Miriam was 22. We had the idea to open a little store, sell our car. And, people tell me that I was very courageous. But really what am I gonna do with 12 grand? I mean, I'll blow that in on a weekend in Vegas, right? So for me, it wasn't risky. It was like, yeah, whatever. Let's open a store and see what happens. I was in retail before. I understood retail. Um, so what were the first big setbacks we had was actually um, an interesting story. My boss, who provided products for me, had been a distributor of these types of brands for a long time in New York, and it was a small business. And then I said, I'm going to open a small store, and can you provide me with product, and I'll pay you as I sell them? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. But then, our business was, after 6 months in business, the New York Times wrote an article on the Sunday Times, and our business blew up overnight.
Wow.
We did every day what we were doing for 30 days, we did in one day, every day, empty the store. And this guy was seeing us like selling 10 grand a day out of that little store, more than he was making. And he became a little greedy, by the way, and basically told me in very eloquent British accent that we didn't make him an equal partner in the business, he would not provide any more products. And that was our livelihood on the line. We were really scared. So I talk about all this in my book, but we basically entertained him while we were looking for other options. We could have closed at that point. We were opening our second store on Madison Avenue, and I was going to Europe, finding alternatives, sources. Now we had money that we could buy products, and we replaced, took us a few months, we replaced everything that he was selling to us from other brands. And when we were ready to transition, I told him, listen, the deal's off the table. I quit my job, go after yourself. And next day we started selling all new merchandise. And we dodged a big bullet. That was a big one. I think the second big challenge was the 9/11. We had just moved our operations from New York City to Miami to expand our business, but outside New York City. But 96% of our revenue came from Manhattan. So when we woke up on September 11 and the planes were flying over our building towards the towers, that was a scary time. I mean, we didn't know if our business was finished. The city was, we were at war. I mean, the city was under attack. All the businesses were closed. A month later, everything was fine and business came back to normal. But it was a scary moment for us. Um,
How did you react to it though? How do you, it's fascinating, I think, from a business sort of crisis management point of view. You were there, your city is under, a lot of people sort of said it's, under attack, as you said. And how do you react to that? What steps do you take when you're in that, when your business is, literally at crisis point and you don't know what's going to happen, I suppose?
I mean, the biggest crisis management I had to deal with was the financial crisis, and I'll tell you about that. But 9/11, from a business standpoint in New York City, was a very small blip in the radar.
Right.
When you looked at our numbers, September 2001, we saw a drop, but in October we were back to where we needed to be. So we sweated bullets, but it was very short-lived, and then they were like relieved very quickly. So we didn't need to go into crisis management. Frankly, we went into people people caring
Mm.
mode. It was more about keeping our employees safe. We had a store in Wall Street where we told our employees to lock the doors and stay there, and then we couldn't communicate with them when the towers came down, and they fortunately went, walking full of dust on the FDR for hours to get to their home. We were more worried about our employee. And, when things like that happen, the last thing on your mind is money and business. But we gathered all our employees. A lot of New York people don't have family there. They work there, they move there, they live by themselves. So we all met, and it was more about supporting each other in this difficult moment. A few days later, the store started reopening and business started to come back. And, we went 2-3 weeks and we're back to normal. So we didn't really have it was more of an emotionally difficult time, the September 11th. To witness it live was a little bit more traumatizing perhaps than seeing it on television, I think. I had never experienced that kind of trauma before, and, I realized it 6 months later that I was a little depressed. I was like, "Shit, I don't feel like working."
Mm.
I had nightmares sometimes. I was like, "Wait a minute, maybe that thing," I was scared to go on an airplane. I was like,
Right, there we go. Trauma, yeah.
because we were flying around looking for stores in LA and Vegas, and I'm like, Wait a minute, maybe I don't want to open more stores on the other side of the world because that means I'm going to be on air traffic all the time." So I started realizing, listen, wait a minute, I'm not being myself. My wife's not being herself. Maybe this thing affected us, you know?
Hmm.
So that became, I snapped out of it and then I pivoted. Again, that was an opportunity to pivot because until then, my plan was to open more stores around the country. I didn't have the money to do that. I didn't want to be on airplanes. And then at about the same time, the metrosexual movement started to creep up in the news. And we were starting to sell to Neiman Marcus and to Barney's. And I thought, you know, maybe we should be focused on wholesale right now instead of opening stores all over the country, which we don't have money for. So I pivoted, and it was the best pivot ever.
Mhm.
Retailers wanted a men's brand, and we were the best men's offering out there. So they all picked us up. Like, it was the easiest thing. Our salespeople were calling, and we were getting PO'd. Saks, Nordstrom, Neiman Marcus, Bloomingdale's. Everybody wanted the brand. And stores all over the country, men's stores, cosmetic stores. Everybody was picking up the art of shaving, and all of a sudden we were seen everywhere. So that became a hugely successful pivot for us. And it was really thanks to September 11th that we made that pivot. So we did that for a few years, ramped up to over 1,000 store distribution in very short time. It was everybody saw the brand, a lot of buzz around the art of shading, but the revenue were not scaling fast enough. So that's when we repivoted back to retail. We realized we're not getting there with this wholesale business fast enough. Our stores are doing $1 million per location, and Neiman Marcus is selling $50,000 a year next to our store. And we're giving them 50% margin, and we have to give them people to support and all that. So I said, all right, so this was great. It got us to $10 million.
Yeah.
It got the brand to a certain level of visibility and buzz. Now let's raise some money. Let's open more stores. Let's refine our retail concept to accommodate malls around America. And we started ramping up our stores. We started opening 10, 12 stores a year, starting in 2005.
Did you pull out of a wholesale then? Did you stop doing wholesale?
No, not at all.
Right.
No, we kept our wholesale division
Hmm.
running while we were refocusing our our. We have two different teams. They were really two divisions, and we built our. We went back to retail. We had 4 stores, 5 stores at that time, 4 or 5. And then we raised $2.5 million locally, and we opened 12 stores. They did extremely well. And then we raised $50 million in capital. That continued to fuel the growth of the stores. And the stores were performing extremely well. So the company was scaling very rapidly, on our way to $50 million. And then we had a licensing deal with Gillette. After they were acquired by P&G, they came to us and said, let's do something together. And we co-branded the art of shaving and Gillette for a high-end razor and brush set. That did super well. And that's when they asked us if we wanted to be acquired. That was February 2008. And we were growing. I mean, the company was doubling in size. We were on a rocket ship in 2008, and we dragged our feet with the bankers, screwed up our transaction. They really dragged their feet, and by the time we got the deal back on track with P&G, and they started due diligence, Lehman Brothers collapsed. P&G people were in my office when, financial crisis, October 6th, I think it was, when the Dow Jones just tumbled and all the stocks went out the window and the world went upside down. And I'm like,
Yeah, it's the worst timing.
where's timing? And in October through December is when we did 40% of our revenue for the year. It was a huge season for us. We were gearing up for it. We were opening a bunch of stores. We were hiring people. We were out of control. And then financial crisis happened, and that was the biggest challenge of my entire career. I mean, I had an offer from P&G that they pulled out of. I had 25% drop in sales overnight in the Q4. My investors didn't want to give us the rest of the money that they had earmarked for us, which we were taking as we needed it. They were like, no, 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 no. You've gone into default. We're not giving you any more money. I was heading towards insolvency very rapidly. Imagine it. You're investing heavily and all of a sudden that's the worst thing that can happen. And that taught me invaluable lessons about crisis management, which I think a lot of entrepreneurs don't master because we're built for growing businesses. We have an optimistic mind. We're not built for crisis management. So I've helped some people along the way based on what I've learned. And, the entrepreneur mindset is your worst enemy when you're in a crisis mode. Because crisis management is not about fixing a problem. It's about avoiding it from getting a lot worse. And if you're thinking you're going to grow your sales, you're dead. You're dead. You can't hesitate. People do too little, too late when it comes to crisis management. That's the biggest mistake I've seen. But fortunately, I had a very strong management team in place. And we went into crisis mode right away. And, we weren't shy about it. As much as it was a disastrous situation, we took it to our advantage. We stopped paying rents to 40 landlords, which in normal circumstances would be the kiss of death. But we knew that we weren't the only retailer suffering. We stopped paying our interest to our investors. We stopped. We didn't let go too many people because we were very lean. We stopped investing in opening new stores. We stopped build outs. All CapEx were out the window. We reduced our inventory. We were building up our inventory for Q4, and then we were building it up for growth. We reduced it dramatically. We were able to get a lot of cash out of that. I mean, we just went into crisis management. And I got the deal back on track a few months later when the dust settled with the crisis. But, we had P&G retraded the deal when they found out the bank was foreclosing on our line of credit. Till the last minute, they didn't realize of writing bullet, talking to bankruptcy lawyers. Imagine telling your company and talking. I had M&A bankers, bankruptcy lawyers. I mean, this is not for the faint of heart. What I tell people is being an entrepreneur can be very uncomfortable, but this felt like being thrown out of an airplane without a parachute. I mean, that shit was crazy. And, fortunately I keep a cool head. I'm built for that stress, but when it was all over, man, that stress came up.
How did it come up? What happened after?
I have this ability to keep cool under the worst situations. But when the situation and the danger is over, those floodgates open and my body was pulsating for weeks after the acquisition was. I was like, that nervous system was like, it was like bottled up in a little can for so long. It just blew up. But we made it happen at the end. We took a haircut on the transaction, which was a hard pill to swallow, but it was still a great deal. Bought me my freedom. Resolved 99% of my problems overnight, and learned a lot of lessons, and have a story to tell around a bonfire, you know?
I'm intrigued. When you were in the midst of that crisis, what was your messaging to your staff and team around you?
So I think there were only one or two people in my company that knew we were negotiating the sale. Nobody knew we were selling the business. My wife was 6 months pregnant, so she knew nothing about how bad the situation was. Uh, but when you're a leader, um, I don't remember exactly what I was saying to them, but I knew what they were seeing. They were seeing me in action. They were seeing me cool. They were seeing me having strategies and to figure out how to get through the storm. Um, I think that gave my team confidence. Nobody jumped ship. Nobody freaked out. Um, as I said, I have this ability to keep cool under extreme pressure for some reason. Um, and I think that was helpful. I was always, they always felt like I had a strong leadership of my people. I also had amazing management team that I had built 2 years prior. So without them, I don't know that I would have been able to do what I did during that crisis. But they went into real action, you know, and we all knew what we had to do, um and only two of them knew that we were selling the company. So I was doing that behind the scenes, and man, I'm getting hot flashes talking
Wow,
about.
yeah, I mean that's an incredible weight to be bearing, really. And then plus you just mentioned that your wife was pregnant. So was that did that just add extra pressure to that? Like, was that a worry at all that it could have just all collapsed around you and then you'll be left with nothing again?
No, I don't think about these things. You know, Here's the thing again, the prudent wisdom allowed me to take $5 million off the table when I raised capital. When I raised the 15, I put 5 million in my bank account, 10 million for the business. That took the pressure off on a lot of stuff. And I always tell people, I see so many entrepreneurs signing their lives away when they bring in investors. They don't even have lawyers looking at their documents, and they'll regret it one day. Or they don't take chips off the table. It's counterintuitive, but investors have no problem with that. We raised 15, 5 for us, 10 for the business. They were cool with it. So while I was going through that crisis, I had $5 million in cash.
Okay.
I, that wouldn't have been a good outcome for me if my
Mm.
business had gone bankrupt. Um, but it gave me, I don't think I would have felt the same way if I had zero at the bank, right? That's a very big difference. That's a huge difference.
Mm.
Huge difference, you know? But yeah.
I suppose that gives you, that gave you that feeling of security, I suppose, right? To then concentrate and focus on the solutions.
Yeah, it's like having a fish net, to catch you if you fall off the wire. But that wasn't the outcome I was pursuing, obviously. And as I said, I never give up. I don't care if you knock me down. I mean, that was a Mike Tyson punch in the face. But I got up and, dusted myself off. And I remember when again, luck would have it that my wife's cousin was the chairman of M&A of Morgan Stanley in London. He was the number one M&A guy around Morgan Stanley globally. And he loved our brand, and he was a cool guy, and we had a bit of a relationship. And my wife was having an ultrasound in February of 2009 on the other room. And I called her cousin. I'm like, can you help me? I'm in this this is my situation. Can you help? He's like, as a matter of fact, I just retired from Morgan Stanley, and I have a non-compete, but I can take small clients like you, so I'll work with you on it. Small together, very small clients. And, he helped me put the deal back on the table, fire Goldman Sachs, and, bring it to the finish line within, by May 31st, 2009. So but the war wasn't over because part of the negotiations due to the financial crisis was that 50% of our purchase price was gonna be in the form of an earn-out.
Mm.
So the sweating didn't stop at signing the purchase agreement. I had an 18 months gig to deliver 22% growth to get 25 or $30 million worth of earnout. And I had 85% of that company at the time. So if I didn't get my and it was a not all or nothing deal. Was great. They didn't try to, they retraded, but they didn't try to, you know, flush our throat or anything like that. They were awesome about these things. And the earnout was not an all or nothing. You deliver 10%, you get, 60% of bank, whatever. Um, but we delivered. There was no freaking way I wasn't gonna get that earn. Impressive. I would have, I would have killed. I would have maimed. I would have. I don't care. I mean, nothing was gonna stop me from getting that earn out. And we delivered 35% growth. So
Amazing.
all is well that ends well.
Mm.
That was traumatizing as well, though, to be so close to this textbook journey and slip at the end. That's why I call my book On the Razor's Edge, because, that's how my entrepreneurs feel that way, small slip here or there, and you can get cut.
But yeah, when you said that, when you said the book title, it just made me think that's just what business is, isn't it? You're always on the edge of a cliff, really, aren't you?
Yes, it's a pun with my business, The Art of Shaving. I think all entrepreneurs live on the razor's edge to a certain extent. And my journey was definitely on the razor's edge, man. I had many, many points, small difference between being a hero and being a zero, man. It's just luck and small windows. After selling the business, I became friends with some of the guys that were in the P&G side, and they were telling me how nobody there wanted to buy my business, only a couple of very powerful dudes. And those dudes left 3 to 6 months after the deal. I was like, man, I can't, how lucky was I to make that thing happen? I mean, that window was so small. You know,
But it's interesting, isn't it? Because you've talked about luck a lot and timing and things like that, and there's obviously lots of great examples of some of that, and the timing that that last example being a good one. But then on the flip side, the timing that was out that you mentioned earlier, your music by mail order company, you said that the timing was wrong, right? Because you was too early in the market. So in some ways, you've been unlucky with timing and lucky with timing. Would you say? Would you agree with that?
I agree, and I think that's my philosophy with luck is the way we really attract luck is by seizing opportunities in our path. I think when we see and grab an opportunity, it leads us towards luck. And when we let them go and we're afraid and we don't grab opportunities, bad luck comes to us, bad things come to us. So I do believe in that. And I believe that problems are opportunities in disguise. Everything that we've been trained from, society's been trained with good and bad. It's like, this is good, this is bad. And nowadays when people tell me, oh, that's great, I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if that's great. We'll see in the future. Like, good things lead to bad things and bad things lead to good things. Who knows? Nobody knows the future. All you can do is be grateful for the present if you're in a good place, and try to be opportunistic and manifest luck by being clear about what you want and being good human being. I don't know, man. Who knows? Pray, whatever, but try it all. You never know what works.
But do you think that that is do you think that's easier to say in hindsight and easier to say, about trying everything, particularly in a business sense? Because that's a kind of really, I suppose, confident, isn't it? So you said, there's a risk, there's no risk there. So what, or there is, you're not scared of risk if you say just try it all. But do you think that can be applied to, when someone's, starting off in business?
Look, it's much easier for me to say those things now. And I'm reverse engineering my experience.
Mm.
And the idea is to teach the younger generation what we've learned so they can stand on our shoulders and not make the same mistakes we have, right? I've gone down that path and I can tell you at mile 1, there's a treacherous area. If I let you know that, you have a bigger chance of not falling into that thing. It doesn't make your journey easier. It just gives you a little bit of an edge that maybe I didn't have. And I think that's really the idea here is to tell you, here's what I've learned. I wish I could tell my 21-year-old self to enjoy the journey and not focus on the destination as much. Easier said than done, but that's what I believe today. Uh, so yeah, it's definitely easier to say. But what I can say confidently is that when luck smiles at you, that can make the difference between being successful and being extremely successful. That's really the
And when you talked about enjoying the ride or enjoying the journey, what's one way that you could have done that? Because everyone says that. I'm like, sometimes I'm a bit confused about what they actually practically mean by enjoying the journey.
So here's a practical way to do that. Instead of thinking that your company from start to end would take 5 years, realize it's going to take 20 years. When you want to drive from New York to California, it's not going to take 12 hours to get there. If you know that, you're not going to freak out 10 hours in and you're just in Ohio. You need to know that this is going to be a long ride. Sit back, relax, listen to some music, enjoy the ride. You still have to do all the same things. There's going to be the same challenges, but just knowing that there is no destination in life. And I'll talk about this in a minute, and enjoy the ride. The other thing that I would suggest, which I think is more available today than it was before, is having a mentor, coaches, and really focusing on your mental, physical, emotional, spiritual health. The stronger you are in those departments, the better that journey is going to be, the more successful you're going to be. And to me, health is wealth, and health is a business strategy that I wish I knew back then. I had some of that because I was already eating very healthy and I had a very healthy, natural lifestyle. But mentally, if I would have been more emotionally stable at the time, if I meditated, if I had gone to therapy, I think I would have been even more successful, or at least it would have been a more enjoyable journey getting there. So yeah, everything I say is easier said than done.
Mm. No, it's a great practical advice there, I would say.
But I'll tell you that the day after I sold my business, bro, okay, I left my business in December 2010. My second son was born. I wake up January 1st, 2011. I have money in the bank. I have an incredible wife. I have 2 healthy baby boys. I live in a beautiful apartment overlooking the ocean in a beautiful city. I have friends. Everybody's healthy. And I'm a miserable fuck. I'm a miserable guy. And I'm like stressed and unhappy. And I realize I'm lucky. I'm lucky because so many people don't get to where I got at 40. And they think that when they get there, they're going to be happy and not stressed. And that is just a fallacy. So I realized this. And right away I said, it has nothing to do with all these things.
Yeah.
All these things is not going to make me feel better about anything. It's an inside job and I need to focus my energy on a personal journey. of wellness. That's when I really got into wellness in many ways, and I started to really invest in my own health, mental, emotional, and physical health. And that was a huge lesson that I try to teach people earlier on because it really is a factor in success as an entrepreneur. Because it's not like a job. It's not like a job. You go, you do it, you leave. Being an entrepreneur, mm, uh, everything is intertwined. Your life. In my case, it was my relationship, my life, my business, my emotions, it was all intertwined. So, you know, that's really important.
That's such an amazing story because I think externally it's sort of similar to what I was sort of saying offline about, there's so much out there on social media about success, and that's also a really great story because everyone would have wanted that moment or that lifestyle that you had, everything kind of from an outside perspective, everything sorted. So they would have expected you to be on top of the world. And I think it's very bold of you, firstly, to admit and to share it with everyone that you were actually, it was the opposite.
It was obvious, and every time I heard somebody say, "You're living the dream," I cringed inside. But, if you're depressed at a carnival, it's obvious that you're going to think,
Mm.
okay, something's wrong with me. If you're depressed in a clinic of depression, you're going to think you're normal. So for me to have all these blessings in my life and be grateful for them, but still feel anxious and feel um, unhappy was pretty obvious at that point. It was like, ooh, something is definitely not right.
But also, such an amazing story for everyone to hear that a lot of people are chasing all of these external things, the house, the car, the salary, etc., etc. And as you said, that's actually in some ways, I mean, that's what society is built on, really, isn't it? In some ways, particularly with social media now, and in some ways, it's a fallacy.
It is. And, I don't want to be hypocritical. I don't like being poor. I never did, never will. Money is a great energy source to have in this world that is all about money to a certain extent. But it's not going to replace things. It's not going to replace peace of mind. It's not going to replace love. It's not going to replace family. It's not going to replace experiences and, um, you know, and health.
Mm.
You know, when people ask me what's the most important thing in your life, I say my health. They're like, oh, not my kids, bro. If I'm not healthy, my kids, I'm not seeing my kids. You know, Nothing else matters. It's health. You got to take care of yourself. Put on your oxygen mask before you put the one on your kid in the plane, right?
100%. And I always say that, and that's exactly the analogy I use in terms of, um, when you're a business leader as well, you have to look after yourself first because it's the same concept as, you can't be a leader to either your kids or to your business if you're not in the best of shape.
100%. I think we understand that much better now than we did 20 years ago. There's a gym in all corporate offices, but yeah, I, that is important. That's if I have any legacies in my life is to share the gift of health and living a natural lifestyle and staying away from toxicity as much as you can. So you can hopefully age gracefully. It's not about how long you live; it's how well you live for how long you live, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just read, I don't know if you've read it, Dr. Peter Attia's book it's called Outlive. He talks about concepts of lifespan, which is, how long you live, but health span. And health span is how healthy and mobile and active are you and how long, because often, with health, particularly, people reach 70 or 80, but then the last sort of 15, 20 years of their life or are the quality of life is really poor.
It sure is, and it's scary. Yeah, you get it. I read that book, and he speaks
Yeah,
my
no, it's really good.
philosophy for sure.
That is another podcast for another day, but I'm going to wrap up with a couple of final questions. One is, what advice would you give to listeners out there who have suffered a failure or setback within their business?
How badly do you want this? That's what grit is to me, and resilience. You know, when we, let's say, give up, when we face challenges, the question is, how badly do you want this?
Mm.
What are you willing to endure to get to achieve your goals? Um, you know, why are you failing? I mean, there's so many ways to coach somebody through that. When I failed with one of my companies that I talked to you about,
Mm.
um, I realized I didn't want to succeed. I didn't really want to succeed at that to a certain extent. Not that I tried to sabotage it by any means, but there was a sense of relief. I, you know, I could have kept going. I just spoke to somebody that said they were in business for 20 years and they were only successful for the last 5. There's nothing wrong with the first 3 years being challenging. I had, but I didn't have the desire to do what was necessary, because in life, when you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So when I said no to that company by shutting it down, I was really saying yes to what I really want to be doing. Otherwise, I could have kept going and turn it around and make it successful. So you just have to dig deep and be honest with yourself.
If you could go back in time and erase all of those business failures from happening, so your music mail order company closing down, and your ingredients recent company falling down, failing and not working, and all of those challenges you had at Art of Shaving, would you do that?
Would I change those?
Yeah, would you, yeah, would you essentially eliminate them from ever happening in history?
The only one I would ever want to eliminate was 2008, because they really threw a wrench. It was a beautiful ending to that story. I mean, it was just a textbook,
Mm.
and you know, it is what it is, man. I wouldn't change my life. I would probably change nothing about my life coming to this point. I've never really had any regrets. I don't believe in that. I try not to have any regrets, because I put myself out, later on, and think to myself, is that something I would regret when I'm on my rocking chair? If the answer is no, I don't care. If it's yes, I do something about it now. So I never regret. Of course, would I want to not have the worst financial crisis happen during my acquisition? By the way, we were one of the few, if not the only one in our space, to have an acquisition in 2009. It was one of the worst years in M&A.
It's the worst time.
And and in our industry, there were zero. I think we were the only one, or a handful of them in that year. So no, you know, no, I don't think like that.
Mm. Amazing. So we always end on a quick fire round. So there's just short questions and short answers. So question 1, failure is.
Opportunity.
What's your life's mission?
Have a positive impact on the next generation of entrepreneurs.
What's one piece of advice you'd give to people on your deathbed?
Don't worry about it.
Name one habit that keeps you resilient.
Meditation, 20 minutes a day.
If you could be immortal and live forever, would you take it, and why?
Probably not. Take some of the, I think that gun to our head is what keeps us excited every day. I think it's kind of perfect.
If you could swap places with another business person in the world, who would it be?
Richard Branson.
Why is that?
I've always admired, he has a chip on his shoulder. He was dyslexic. He started businesses. He has an interesting philosophy about people and about companies. I believe he stayed humble, even though he's been uber successful. He's fun. He's a guy I would like to hang out with. So, I have very little I'm a fan club. I'm a fan of very few fan clubs out there. I'm not wired that way, but I do admire. I do admire him compared to a lot of other very successful entrepreneurs. He's one that stands out for me.
Mm. Is there someone you could recommend you think I should have on as a guest?
Yeah, I mean, I've been asked that lately in my podcast. Um, you know, I recommend my wife. I think she's, very modest, but she's definitely the brains in our family, and she has a lot to say about mostly about health and subjects that she's very, very strong with. But I can think about it and email you
Yeah,
the
great.
names.
I would love that. Thank you. So, Eric, where can people find you and connect with you?
ericmalka.com is the easiest way to get to me.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes, and obviously I'll put details of your new book as well. So thanks so much for being here, for sharing so much wisdom and some delicate subjects. And yeah, I think people are going to get a lot out of this episode. So thank you for being here.
Thank you. That was great.
Thank you for listening to Beyond the Fail. Really hope you enjoyed this episode and learned something new. Please do subscribe to the show and leave us a review. It really does help us to grow and to reach more people. Do follow us on social media too. We're at Jeswood on Instagram and at Beyond the Fail on YouTube and also on Linktree. Thanks again and see you soon.